In previous videos, we learned to build an application for a real estate office, which included a web section and a section for smart devices. Afterwards, we saw how the security of both applications could be solved through the GAM, GeneXus Access Manager, by configuring the property Enable Integrated Security with a value set to true at the version level. The GAM is a security module developed with GeneXus that solves authentication and authorization issues for both web and smart device applications. The idea in using the GAM is that the security solution can be applied in the most declarative way possible. This can be easily achieved because the GAM is a security module developed on a GeneXus KB. That is, it's part of our application and enables a centralized solution for every aspect relative to security. The GAM also presents an API to access different methods and properties when this has to be done from our application to the GAM's knowledge base. The API's properties and methods may be accessed through external objects, imported when the GAM is enabled in our application. This allows us to perform various actions, such as obtaining the user that is logged on when we need to use it from within the application. Or we may need to access not the user's name, but rather the user's address, or any other data. We might also need the authentication types configured in our application. Or we could also obtain the permits relative to a role for performing actions with them within our application. Let's now look at an example of how we can use the API. As we saw before, the realtors in our application may enter and view the properties that are on sale or for lease by accessing the application for smart devices from their own devices. Since the property transaction is unique to each agent, we will need to identify the agent that enters a property into the application. For this purpose, we will store, in the property transaction, the ID of the agent who enters that property in the application. Additionally, in the list of properties shown in the application for smart devices, real estate agents must only be capable of viewing the records that each of them has entered, and not the data entered by others. We've already created our web and smart device application for the real estate office. As we can see here, the GAM has been applied to our application. We now go to the property transaction to define a new attribute that will enable us to store the user that is to be logged on by the GAM. The name of this attribute will be user ID, and it'll be of the GAM user identification type. We can see that the GAM user identification type is a domain that is imported along with the GAM's objects. For the transaction rules, we'll declare equal user ID get user. This is how we'll be capturing the data on the user that is being logged on, which will be stored in the property transaction when a property is entered into the application. GetUser is a procedure with the following parm rule declared, and whose logic allows us to capture the user that is logged on in our application. GAMUser, on the other hand, is a static variable that instances the data on the logged on user, with the possibility of using related methods such as getName, getEmail, and so on, for obtaining the corresponding related data. In this case, we'll use the getName method to obtain the name of the user that is logged on. This will allow us to obtain the data on the real estate agent who is logged on when a new property is entered into the application, and this data will then be saved to the table when the record is confirmed. Now let's see what we need to do to ensure that each real estate agent only views his or her own properties from the list of properties in the smart device application. For this purpose, we create the data selector we see here. Please note that the getUser procedure is the one we have recently created. We now go to the Work with Devices property. We'll select List, and on the grid, we go to the Data Selector property, and associate it to the data selector we've just created. Now that the changes in GeneXus are ready, we can press F5. The reorganization is executed first to add the new user ID attribute to the property transaction. Now let's log in with username agency01 to record a new property. First, we'll see that there are two properties already recorded, one under the name of userAdmin and the other under the name of useragency01. So we'll record a new property under the agency01 user. The name of this property is Utopia. Then we add the date, the address, and insert an image. And also the neighborhood where the property is located, Coral Gable. And now when we press the Confirm button, we in fact get that the user agency01 is the one responsible for entering this property. If we now go to the Smart Device application and log on as the user agency01, we will see that the properties we view are in fact those entered by that specific real estate agent. In the list of properties, we will actually see the two properties entered by this agent. By enabling the GeneXus Access Manager in our application, we were able to use the API's methods and properties in an easy manner to obtain data on the GAM and use it from our application. This means that the API allowed us to expand the functionality of the security mechanisms provided by the GAM.